Today I'm going to find out the cheapest possible way to shoot astrophotography in the Milky Way. So this isn't scientific, and I'm concentrating on wide field astrophotography. But I was thinking, what would be the cheapest way to take a photograph of the stars? There are the full frame cameras such as the Nikon 850D, the Canon EOS 5D Mark IV, or the Sony a7R IV, as well as the new Nikon and Canon mirrorless cameras. But these are very expensive, even before you buy any specialized lenses for astrophotography. So I'm going to be thinking outside the box to see what I can get, and to see what I can get for as little money as possible to get a good photograph of the stars. Luckily, I was able to go out and get some shots of the night sky at a Bortle 3 location before lockdown hit. So I have some test shots from the two cameras that I ended up choosing. But first of all, I'll go through the different options that are out there and show you what I chose and why I chose what I did. First of all, there's the sensor size. If you search any how-tos on astrophotography, full frame seems the way to go, and most tutorials will tell you that for wide field astrophotography, you need a full frame camera. But this is not always the case, especially if you're only doing it every now and then, or if you're uploading just to the web. Even though full frame cameras do give you a slightly better image quality when it comes to astrophotography, crop sensors are getting better and are starting to hold their own when it comes to taking the odd shot of the night sky, especially if you're just posting them online. The good old Canon 5D Mark II was revolutionary in its time and would be a contender, but they are still quite expensive, and I thought these would have dropped in price a little bit more than they have. So they are actually holding their value. You can pick one up for around about $300 to $400 secondhand. They do have a 21 megapixel sensor, which would be good to soak up that light from the night skies. But at $400 for just the body, you'd still have to spend some more money to get a decent lens. Now, to get the cheapest decent lens for astrophotography, you'd have to get the Samyang 14mm f2.8, and this would cost you another $328. So I'm sure I can do better than $728 in total. Then there's the Sony a7 first generation. Again, this is still going for around about $500 second-hand right now. It has a 24 megapixel sensor and will go up to around about 8,000 to 10,000 ISO. But again, to get a lens for it, it would be another $400 at least. So the cheapest viable full-frame camera would be around about $700 to $1,000. I then thought about the Canon 550D. Even though it's a cheap camera, the sensor is pretty good. And I took this time-lapse on my 600D, which is pretty much the same sensor as the 550D. Now you can get one of these for around about $320, but you still need a lens, like the Samyang once again. So this still rounded up to $600 to $700. Next I thought maybe the a6000 from Sony. This comes with a kit lens and is relatively cheap nowadays. You can get one for around about £250 or $300. Even though the kit lens is not a specialized lens, at the widest 16mm focal length, it has an aperture of 3.5, so it's better than f4, but not quite as good as f2.8. The a6000 is not too shabby at higher ISOs either. You can push it to 6,400 or even 8,000, but not much more than this. The sensor is a 24 megapixel sensor, so there are plenty of pixels to work with. Also, even though I'm shooting with a kit lens, there would also be the option to upgrade at a later date to a faster lens. So this does have that bonus feature of having interchangeable lenses. Now this next one is a little bit out there and probably the last thing you'd think for astrophotography, but it is cheap at £195 or $250, and it has a built-in lens. It's the RX100 Mark II. This has a small sensor, but is pretty good up to ISO 6400. The lens isn't the widest, giving a 28mm full frame equivalent at the widest possible focal length that you have. But the aperture at this focal length is f1.8. So this is fantastic and will let in a lot of light. So after looking at all of these, I ended up picking up an a6000 and the RX100 Mark II. These were the cheapest options. Remember, I want to see what is the cheapest possible way to shoot the stars. I then went out at night and got a few test shots with these two cameras. I got them both on a tripod, Kept the ISO at 6400 as this was the upper usable limit for both, and then I set the exposure time to 15 seconds. Then opened the aperture as wide as possible, f1.8 for the RX100 and f3.5 for the A6000. Now this is what I got. Straight away you can see the RX100 is much brighter at f1.8. When you do bump up the exposure levels, noise really does start to creep into the A6000 shadows, whereas the RX100 seems a little bit cleaner. Again, this is because of that extra light being let in from the f1.8 aperture. Now you can definitely see the tighter framing of the RX100. It does put the Milky Way bigger in your frame and in the shot because of that 28mm full frame crop equivalent, but you could easily get some decent shots with this camera. And if you wanted to go wider, there would be the option of stitching a few shots together to build a panorama. Next, I took about 10 shots from each camera and stacked them together in Starry Landscape Stacker to see if this helped. Stacking shots really does clean up the noise in the whole shot. Again, with both of these, you can see it really does produce a much better shot when stacking. And this is a good tip as well. If you don't have a very fast lens, or if you only have the kit lens but want to go out and shoot the stars, you can still do it. Just get to a dark location, get the camera on a tripod and take a series of at least 10 shots as close to each other as possible. Then when you back home, stack them in a program like Starry Landscape Stacker or Sequitur to get rid of a lot of that unwanted noise. Now, if you want to learn how to stack your photos, I've got a video on this already and I've linked it in the corner and in the description. After stacking the shots, it's clear that the RX100 did a fantastic job, and this was down to that faster aperture of f1.8 once again. Also, the sensor is actually a really good quality sensor, even though it is tiny. So if you want to photograph the stars but don't know what to get or what to do, by far the cheapest way to shoot the stars is with the RX100 Mark II. I got mine for around about $200 secondhand, and even though it's pretty beaten up, it really does take some good shots of the stars. I was really surprised at how well it did. Because the RX100 is so small, I always have mine with me. And when the weather is awful or it's too rainy to take out my big camera, that's when I get it out. Another time is when we're on a long hike and I don't want to be carrying all of my camera kit, or when we're at a location where big cameras aren't allowed, or security are going to kick you off that site for having a professional looking camera. Now, for all of these different scenarios, it really does a great job. And on top of this, you can also get a great shot of the stars with it, which I've found out today. It might not be a full frame high megapixel beast, but at $200 instead of at least $3,000 with a decent lens, it's a tiny amount to pay for what you get. Now, do you know of a cheaper way of shooting the stars? If so, let me know in the comments below. It'll be great to hear what you think. Now, if you want to learn more about shooting the stars, click on this next tutorial here. And to learn about an app that will help you plan where and when to go to shoot the stars, click on this link down here. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for weekly tutorials in photography. I'll see you next time.